Hey, what's up, guys? Happy Monday to you. Hope you had a wonderful weekend and are ready for another episode of TNC. This is episode number 354 of the Neutral Corner Boxing Podcast. I am your host, Michael Montero. We got a few things to talk about today. I wasn't going to do a show today, but there's a few things that I'd like to discuss, and then we can do a quick preview of what's coming up this weekend. Nothing great, but there's a loaded schedule. Just, there isn't really the best matchups out there. Although Top Rank actually has a pretty nice one, I should say, in their main event. So we'll talk about that. If I can get to a few phone calls, I will. Guys, I'm really, really busy right now. I got a few projects I'm working on. Just busy, dude. So it's hard for me to do a super long show right now. But if I can get to a few phone calls, I will do that, okay? In the meantime, before I get started, please make sure you're smashing that like button. I like my man John here says, I always hit the like button even before the show starts. I appreciate that, Taylor. I appreciate that. And Alexander says, number one pound for pound at the moment is the tie between Tank and Paul. I agree with you. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. Not really about pound for pound, but about Jake Paul. So, yeah, make sure you guys pay the fee. I always remind you, pay the fee. Non-monetary. I'm just asking you to make sure you share the show. Get it out there on your social media. Word of mouth is how we spread this show and make it grow. Everything is word of mouth, okay? So please, please, please pay the fee. And I ask that you do that every single week. Smash that like button, all that good stuff. Make sure you're subscribed because YouTube likes to unsubscribe people for some weird reason. Make sure you're subscribed. Click that notification bell. All that good stuff. Yada, yada, yada. You guys know. You know the drill. For those of you, by the way, for those of you new to the show, I've gotten a lot of new subscribers recently and new followers. I thank you for subscribing, for following. I've gotten a lot of t-shirt orders in the last few weeks around the world. I've been sending t-shirts all over the world, man. It's been really, really awesome. Guys, thank you so much. If you want to check out a Montero Unboxing t-shirt, just go to my website, monterounboxing.com, and just do it from right there. All right, so thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Now let's get into this thing. News and or notes. Dillian Whyte tests positive once again for a banned substance. The actual drug that he tested positive for, to my knowledge, that has not been revealed yet, has not been made public, at least at the time I'm recording this. But his fight with Anthony Joshua coming up that really nobody really gave a damn about anyway has been canceled. So now Matchroom Boxing is trying to find a replacement opponent for Anthony Joshua. I don't blame them one bit. Look, Anthony Joshua is their biggest fighter. He's the biggest brand in the UK. He's one of the biggest brands in all of global boxing, despite losing those fights recently to Alexander Usyk, right? He got a W earlier this year against Franklin, and they're trying to get him back in the ring again before the end of the year. I get it. Smart. So go ahead and find him a replacement opponent. Guys, they're not going to be able to get him a top-level dude. It's not going to be Filip Hrgovic or somebody like that. It's just not. Some of the names being tossed around are not necessarily the best names. But, again, I get it. If you've already bought tickets and all this stuff, then, you're still going to get a fight. If you don't like the replacement opponent, you don't have to go to the fight. You don't have to buy the pay-per-view over there. It is what it is. Hopefully next year, Anthony Joshua is back in there against the top 10 heavyweight. I have no problem after these fights with Usyk, them taking a step back and just doing some developmental fights. I thought the Franklin fight was good because that was, Jermaine Franklin's a guy that isn't like a retread or an old guy or something. It was somebody that AJ could work on some stuff with. They need to find another opponent like that for him. I don't want to see Derek Chisora, Robert Helene. I just don't want to see those guys. I didn't want to see Dillian Whyte. Those guys, their careers are over. It's time for them to retire. And that felt like just like a payday kind of a thing. So hopefully they find the right kind of opponent that can get AJ some work and give him a look he hasn't seen before. That's what I'm hoping for. All right. Also, according to reports, now, I'm about to say is controversial, right? Because it comes down to who you believe. But according to reports, to the people I have talked to, the pay-per-view fight between Errol Spence and Terence Crawford did around 600,000 pay-per-view buys. Now, some people will have you think it's almost 700,000. Some people out there say it's like 500,000. As I always say with this stuff, guys, you're arguing over 200,000 or so pay-per-view buys. There was a point when people were arguing whether it was 1 million or 1.5 million or something like that with the pay-per-view buy scale that we had back in the day. Now you guys are bickering over, no, it wasn't 525, it was 573. You know, you're arguing. It's around 500,000. Like, chill the fuck out. So this thing sold around 600,000 pay-per-view buys. If it's a little over that, if it's a little under that, so freaking what? It's right around that number. Okay. That means combined with the gate revenue, this was a successful promotion. It was one of the more successful, commercially successful events of the year. Certainly not the most commercially successful, though. It's crazy to think Gervonta Davis and Ryan Garcia did a bigger gate, you know, with the tickets, and substantially more buys in the modern era. I won't say substantially historically, but in the modern era, substantially more pay-per-view buys, if you believe reports. They did 400,000 more buys. And you look at this and you look at the accomplishments of especially Terence Crawford, but also Errol Spence. Errol Spence is far more accomplished than Gervonta Davis and Ryan Garcia. And Terence Crawford is more accomplished than Errol Spence. So the level of accomplishment between those two events, the fighters in those two events, was vast, right? The gap between the two of them. Ryan Garcia is a glorified prospect. He's a contender. He's a baby contender. The status he was at when he fought Tank. Tank is a WBA regular champion. That's it. He hasn't fought an elite level opponent in his best weight, in his physical prime, ever in his career. Ever. Yet, their pay-per-view event, their fight, had a hell of a lot more buzz on social media. There were way more people talking about it, way more podcasters talking about it. Guys like Joe Rogan, Barstool Sports, those casual fan type of things. There was way more juice, way more energy for Davis Garcia than for Spence-Crawford. Higher ticket sale revenue, higher sponsorships and endorsements and all that, and then substantially higher pay-per-view. Why? Well, that's going to be the theme of the show as it relates to Jake Paul. The why has to do with the 21st century way of marketing fighters and social media popularity. That is the new economic muscle in this industry. And guys that are more popular on social media are going to sell more than guys who may be far more accomplished and much better fighters, but don't necessarily have the clout on social. That's where we're at in this industry. It's not just in boxing. It's across the board in all of entertainment, not just sports, but all of entertainment. But boxing's unique because there is no league. There is no team that you're a part of, right? If, I'm wearing the Chicago White Sox cap, right? That's a team. That's part of a league. So if you're a player on that team, you're representing a team, and that team plays in a league. That is, so you're represented by several different things. In boxing, you're a free agent, man. You are the brand. So it's very, very different. We'll talk more about this stuff because I want to get into the Jake Paul thing. But before I do that, I want to rehash a little bit of the fallout, the collective freak out after Terence Crawford dominated and stopped Errol Spence, a week and a half ago, a little over a week ago. There was a mass freak out in a certain segment of the boxing universe, particularly here in America, on Twitter, which is now X. I don't give a shit. I'm going to keep calling it Twitter. One day I'll call it X, but it's probably going to take me a while. I'm probably going to be calling it Twitter for a while, guys. Sorry. On Twitter, on YouTube, of course, there's these YouTube channels, but even segments of the American boxing press, the network executives, some of the commentators have spoken up about it. So there was just this massive response, and then a response to the response, which included some damage control. I want to talk a little bit about this, and then we're going to let it go. Okay, we're going to move forward. I admit I had some fun trolling last week. Maybe I stepped on the gas a little too much a couple of times and had to pull back, but it was 5 years of buildup. Forgive me. Forgive people like me who were dealing with idiots for 5 years and being lied to for 5 years. We had a week to have a little fun. So just please forgive. But I want to, let me pull back here and do a really corny sports analogy. And I admit this isn't an apples to apples comparison, but it is apples to oranges. It's fruit. It's all fruit. Okay. So what I'm saying is it is relevant. Just stick with me for a second. Okay. The NFL, National Football League, that is our American Gridiron Football League here in the States. It is the most popular league that we have in American sports. Okay. It's big business. For those of you who don't know, there are dozens of teams and there are two conferences. There is the AFC and the NFC, National Football Conference, American Football Conference. Okay. I won't get into the historical and how they got there. Just listen, there's two conferences. Okay. In those conferences are different divisions. So you have an AFC North, South, West, and East champion. They all play each other. There's a few wild card teams in the playoffs. You get an AFC champion from that. Same thing on the NFC, okay? The winners of those two leagues play each other in the Super Bowl, all right? I'm going to add another one. Major League Baseball. You have the National League. You have the American League. You have a playoff system to determine the champion of the National League and then the champion of the American League. They play each other in the World Series. Okay. What we often get in boxing, and here's my lame sports analogy, okay? What we often get in boxing is an NFC champion and an AFC champion, but no Super Bowl. We get a National League champion, an American League champion, but no World Series, okay? So sticking with this analogy, which I admit it isn't the greatest, but come on, you guys can see where I'm going, right? Imagine if you're an NFL fan, and you've been waiting 5 years for the Super Bowl. You've known who the best team in the AFC is. You've known who the best team in the NFC is. But the people in control of the situation lied to you for 5 years. Let's say the AFC was the power broker in this situation. And the AFC wanted to protect their champion. So they told you for 5 years, oh, that NFC champion, he's overrated. He ain't fought nobody. He needs to leave his promoter and come over to our side of the street. No. We're the AFC champion. We're going to go ahead and just play another AFC team. And you guys can, and that will be our Super Bowl this year. Then another year comes around. Oh, you know what? We're going to play another AFC team, even though we're already the AFC champion. You know, we're the best over here on this platform. But this game is just as relevant as us versus the other guy on the NFC, just as relevant, right? And they did this to you for 5 years. That is essentially what the buildup to Spence and Crawford was. Same thing in baseball. What if for 5 years, 5 seasons, you had a National League champion, an American League champion, but no World Series? On 29 July in Las Vegas, we got the welterweight Super Bowl. We got the welterweight World Series. Okay? These were the two top guys in that division since 2018. And the reason why I kind of went so hard on my trolling spree and my kind of gloating, rubbing it in a little bit, is because there are guys like me. Go back and look at the track record, okay? I'm not just saying this now. I'm not blowing smoke. Since 2018, we've been telling you the Super Bowl was Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. That was the premier welterweight fight to make. Does anyone out there doubt that Terence Crawford wanted that fight? Like who thinks Terence Crawford wasn't ready to fight Errol Spence right away, given what we saw a couple weeks ago? I think Terence Crawford would have fought Errol Spence immediately after the Jeff Horn fight. I really, really do. Maybe take one fight in between, something like that. But he would have fought Errol Spence as early as 2019, 2020. I absolutely believe that. And for the record, I think Errol Spence would have fought Crawford. I think Bob Arum and Top Rank would have made the fight. The team that did not want to make the fight was Spence's management. They didn't want to make the fight. Guys, some of you are forgetting They tried to make Spence Thurman this year. Do you guys remember that? Do you remember those reports? Do you remember last year when they bumped Thurman up to number 1 in the sanctioning body, number 1 in the ratings? They used their poll and how much corruption with the sanctioning organization to bump Thurman, who has like 3 fights in 278 years, bump him up to number 1 because they wanted to delay the Crawford fight even longer. But they couldn't get a deal worked out that made sense between Crawford and Thurman. And so they went with Crawford Spence. And I got to give Spence credit. He said, make the damn fight. I really do think at some point, Spence kind of finally put his foot down and said, listen, make the Crawford fight. And so they got it done. But don't forget, they wanted to delay it even further, guys. They wanted to do Spence versus Thurman. Remember, they wanted to do Spence versus Pacquiao, but that got messed up because Spence had an injury. So they've been trying to delay this thing. Okay. I want to make sure that I hit on all these points. Yes. So what Spence's management was basically saying, PBC, which is his promotion, PBC, Al Heyman, that whole crew, Showtime, Steven Espinoza, that whole crew, the LDBC, boxing scene, their media outlets, their fan outlets, right? All that entire apparatus was basically trying to minimize Terence Crawford, marginalize Bud and his importance, how great he was, find ways to shit on his resume, find ways to make it all his fault, find ways to make it Bob Arum's fault. Oh, you got to cross the street. You got to do all this. That. Guys, Crawford crossed the street over a year and a half ago. It still took these guys nearly 2 years to make the fight. And don't forget, they wanted to make Spence Thurman this summer. They didn't even want to make Crawford this summer. That's the truth. Just go back and look at the reports. Am I missing? If I'm missing something, guys, correct me. Okay. But these were the guys telling us that Spence versus Porter, Spence versus Danny Garcia, Spence versus Mikey Garcia, Spence versus Ugas. That's the Super Bowl. Remember, these were pay-per-view fights now. They're trying to tell you that those fights were just as relevant, just as important as Spence versus Crawford. They went as far as to leave Crawford off of certain graphics and stuff during their broadcasts, right? And now I got to talk about this because here's where the damage control comes in. I saw Steven Espinoza beating up on some of you guys on Twitter last week. And let me just say this about Espinoza. He's a successful guy, a man in his position, okay? A network executive should not be getting in Twitter wars with boxing fans or even boxing media for that matter. It's a really, really bad look. It's even a worse look when he's retweeting and liking personal attacks on Twitter, which he does all the time, and joining in on chats where they're openly stating racist things, anti-Semitic things, and throwing out completely baseless conspiracy theories. And he's sitting in on these chats. Dude, you're an executive at a major premium cable network. Act accordingly, dude. Act like a professional. But I saw Espinoza going in and saying, hey, that graphic that's been shared that didn't have Terence Crawford, that was a PBC on Fox graphic. That had nothing to do with Showtime. And even Brian Custer joined in on that. And for the record, I like Brian Custer. He's a good dude. I like Brian. I got nothing bad to say about him. Good guy. But even he joined in and said, yeah, man, this wasn't PBC on Showtime. We talked about Bud. And they even showed a graphic. They didn't say what fight it was from, what broadcast it was from, but they showed a graphic where they showed welterweight champions, and they had Bud on there. Bud was at the very bottom of the graphic. There were several fighters listed above him at the top of the graphic that Bud was much, much better than. But here's where I would say this right too, Brian, and of course Espinoza. Here's where they're not really telling the whole story, and there's a little bit of damage control here. Guys, come on. Maybe you didn't make that one graphic that I shared last week and other people shared that left Bud off. That was a PBC on Fox graphic. Okay, that was a PBC on Fox broadcast. But you can't deny that for 4 or 5 years, you guys were trying to minimize Bud, and you were trying to sell to your fan base the notion that fights with Porter, Ugas, etc., were just as viable, just as relevant, just as important as a fight with Bud. You were trying to minimize him. I can't think of one instance where Jim Gray, and you guys, again, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim Gray in a post-fight interview pressed Errol Spence about Terence Crawford. He may have brought the name up. He didn't very often, but they weren't pressing him. Nobody in the commentary team, Al Bernstein, Mauro Ranallo, none of those guys were talking about Terence Crawford and pushing that and pressing it. There was a business plan over there to basically lie for 5 years and push it as far as you can. And y'all tried to push it another year because you tried to make the Keith Thurman fight. So let's not pretend that didn't happen. Okay? It was you guys delaying it. You guys withheld the Super Bowl, the welterweight Super Bowl for fans for 5 years. Now, I understand if you didn't want to do it in 2019. You had to build up the fight a little bit. Okay. I understand if you didn't want to do it during COVID because there was the lockdown. Okay. And then you wanted to wait till fans are back. I'll give you a pass for all that. But 2021, bro, fight should have happened. 2022, rematch should have happened. Summer of 2023, we should have just seen the rubber match. That's where we're at. That's what should have happened. We should have at least been the rematch this year. Definitely not the first fight. And that is on you guys. It is. Okay. Further, just a further look at this, okay? Since 2018, as I mentioned, the best fight, Spence and Crawford. Don't give me Keith Thurman, because Thurman has had 3 fights since 2017. At one point in the mid-2010s, Thurman was the top welterweight. He was the guy, right? He had this brief little run. And I talked about this on Twitter today. You can argue, I'm not saying definitively, but you can argue that Keith Thurman at his best was just as good, if not maybe slightly better than Errol Spence at his absolute best. But both guys had fundamental flaws. Thurman just kind of became a semi-retired fighter after like 2015, 2016. And like, as I mentioned, he's had 3 fights since 2017, I believe. So he's been semi-retired. And for Spence, his lifestyle outside the ring kind of really, really messed things up for him in the last few years. So both of these guys had some flaws about them, their personality, their makeup, whatever, that affected their career. But they had little runs where they were seen as ranked as the top guy. But I don't know. Look, again, from 2018 on, I always said, go back and look at the record. I always said that Terence Crawford was the best welterweight in the world. I wasn't mad at you if you rated Errol Spence number 1 because he had unified titles. But I always thought Bud was the best. I've been pretty consistent on that. Anyway, since 2018, in 2018, Errol Spence fought. In 2018, Terence Crawford fought Jeff Horn, got the WBO belt, okay? That same year, Spence fought Lamont Peterson and Carlos Ocampo. I believe Carlos Ocampo was his last mandatory. So this guy's been able to go without a mandatory for about 4 or 5 years. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, everyone. 2019, he fights Mikey Garcia and Sean Porter. 2020, he fights Danny Garcia. Doesn't fight in 2021 at all. They were trying to make the fight with Manny Pacquiao, right? And then 2022 fights Yordenis Ugas. So I'm looking at that resume. Guys, none of those fights comes within a mile of the fight with Errol Spence. The only fight that I can actually see them doing because of the business behind it would be the fight with Manny Pacquiao. I could see that, even though I didn't like that fight. Looking back, though, and seeing what Manny did to Keith Thurman and how Spence just looked, Manny might have had a decent shot in that fight, but just I think Spence would have won, and it would have maybe got ugly for Pacquiao at one point. I mean, the guy was like 40-something at that point. But I could see from a business commercial point of view why they would do that fight before Crawford. Okay, got that. But these other fights, Ugas, Danny Garcia, really, Sean Porter, Mikey Garcia, Lamont Peterson, the Ocampo fight, whatever, that's a mandatory. But all those other fights, you're telling me those were better than Terence Crawford fights? I understand Terence Crawford wasn't this huge commercial success, but he was certainly a bigger name than all those fighters I just listed. Possible exception being Mikey Garcia. Mikey Garcia, though, was a blown-up featherweight. You can't tell me that was a better fight than the Terence Crawford fight. Let's look at the titles Spence won, because a lot is made about these titles, and he cleaned out the division. He beat Kell Brook in 2017 to get the IBF belt, okay? Then in 2019, he gets the WBC belt off of Sean Porter. Porter had won a vacant belt, the vacant WBC belt, from Danny Garcia in 2018. So there was hardly any lineage with that WBC belt. That was a PBC in-house special between Mauricio Suleiman and Al Heyman. That's what that was. All right. Then in 2022, he fights Yordenis Ugas for the WBA belt that went back to before Ugas. Pacquiao had it. Before him, Thurman had it, right? So that had a little bit of lineage to it. But if you actually look at where Keith Thurman won that belt, Keith Thurman won the interim WBA belt against Leonard Bundu in 2014. Then he was elevated in 2015 after Floyd Mayweather retired, because Floyd had the quote-unquote full title or super title, whatever the hell it is. Thurman defended that interim belt that he was upgraded to full champion after Floyd left, after Floyd retired. He defended that belt 5 times in 5 years. So 2015 up to 2019. In 5 years, he defends that. So once a year for 5 years, and then loses to Pacquiao in 2019. That's the lineage of those belts. Okay, the belt that actually had the strongest lineage of the 3 was the IBF that he won off of Kell Brook, because Brook had won that belt off of Sean Porter, handing him his first professional loss, and then defended it multiple times. But I repeat, as I mentioned before, Kell Brook in that fight with Spence was coming down 13 pounds off of facial reconstructive surgery and a brutal knockout loss to Gennady Golovkin, who at the time was the most devastating offensive fighter in the sport. So all things considered, there's plenty of asterisks and holes in this great Hall of Fame resume that we were sold for 5 years. So I just want to put that out there. And I'll leave it with this, okay, and then we'll move forward, I promise. What would have been refreshing is for that entire side that tried to bamboozle everybody for 5 years, if they could have just owned it. If Steven Espinoza could have put out a statement saying, congratulations to Terence Crawford, Errol Spence on a great fight, 2 warriors. We're proud of both of you. Thank you to the fans who supported this event. We wish we could have made this one sooner. That was at least partially our fault. We own that. We'll do better in the future to bring you fights like this sooner, because that's what the fans deserve. Something like that. Now, let me ask you guys, would that make any difference to you if that was the stance that everybody on that side was taking, or would it not matter to you? Am I just being corny with all this? If the LDBC could just accept the Super Bowl champion as being Terence Crawford, he won the welterweight Super Bowl a week and a half ago, and just give him his flowers and say, congrats, bro. Wow. Thinking back to continue with this Super Bowl analogy, I'm thinking back to the Dallas Cowboys dynasty where they won like 3 Super Bowls within a few years. And there was one of those Super Bowls where they played the Buffalo Bills, who were the 4-time straight AFC champions. They went to 4 straight Super Bowls, okay? So they were the best team in the AFC in that era. And Dallas beat them, I want to say it was like 55-10, one of those Super Bowls. It was a shellacking, dude. They destroyed them. Destroyed the absolute best team in the AFC 4 years running. Slaughtered them 55-10, because that Dallas Cowboys dynasty team was one of the best teams in the history of the NFL, maybe the best. Okay, I don't know. Patriots, their dynasty's better, but they're up there with like the Steelers dynasty of the 70s. They're up there, right? That's what this was. This was 55-10, Dallas Cowboys, Buffalo Bills. That's what Terence Crawford, Errol Spence was. It wasn't close. It wasn't competitive. This was about as decisive as it gets. So what if Everyone on that side of the street just owned it and just said, you know what? Bud really is special. He really is that guy. Wow. Spence is good. He's good, tough fighter, but Bud is generational. You could put Bud in any welterweight era and he competes. Can't say the same with Errol Spence. That's it. If they could just leave it at that. But of course they haven't. And that's why guys like me kind of had to troll a little bit and have a little fun. So that's where we're at, guys. All right. All right. Let's get a couple super chats here, then I will move forward. Trenton Perio with the super chat. Thank you so much. He says, people think Tank can beat Bud. Andrade versus Benavidez. Okay, two good ones here. So, yeah, I've seen people on that side of the street, okay, out there on Twitter and stuff, and I'm sure you guys have seen these posts where they're talking about Gervonta Davis fighting Terence Crawford and that he would beat them. And here's what makes it worse. There was I think it was a Twitter chat. Like Twitter has these rooms where it's like a chat room and you verbally like audio talk, right? It's kind of like a Google Hangout back in the day. I don't even know if they still have those, but Twitter kind of has a feature like that. And there was one where they were discussing this and Gervonta Davis was on that chat and he was basically saying, yeah, I'd smoke Bud. I'd beat Crawford's ass, basically is what he was saying. And all these LDBC guys in that chat were like, yeah. And so now that's the big thing, right? If I'm Tank's management, I'm going to him and saying, dude, could you stop going in these chats with these people? These fucking people accused Tyson Fury of attempted murder against Deontay Wilder, and they accused Kenny Bayless and the Nevada State Athletic Commission and Mark Breland in colluding with attempted murder. They talked about Wilder's autopsy, showed a dent in his forehead, and that was proof that Fury had egg weights. These people are fucking nut jobs, dude. Could you please not go in these chats? Because I guarantee you guys, those sorts of conversations are happening at other platforms, okay? We've seen Shakur Stevenson fuck up. Remember, he got in that fight in a parking lot, right? He's made some weird social media posts and stuff. Trust me when I say, okay, there are people talking to him and coaching him a little bit. Hey, you may not want to do this. You're selling a brand, okay? So there are other promoters on other parts of the boxing world that are having these conversations with fighters. Yeah, don't go in some whack job chat room talking about conspiracies and racism and all this stuff. You probably should disassociate from that, right? So yeah, Trent, to your point, these people are just freaking nuts. Now, they're talking about Demetrius Andrade versus David Benavidez. I find this to be hilarious. Andrade started his career at 154 pounds. Benavidez is a former fat kid who weighed over 200 pounds, who bust his ass to make 168. Andrade is going to be faster, maybe a little trickier with his offense and stuff, but Benavidez is just going to roll downhill on him and basically Jarrett Hurd him to death. Errol Spence him to death. I like Benavidez in that fight. Is it really that interesting of a fight to you guys? It doesn't interest me, but I'd rather them fight each other than not fight anybody, right? Than just sit around their ass. Now, if that's on regular Showtime, that's a decent fight on regular Showtime. If that's pay-per-view, oh, good luck with that. Sam with the super chat. Thank you, brother. He says, Manny was going to fight Spence, whereas Freddie said Manny never fight TC ever. That's a great point, Sam. That is a fantastic point. When Manny Pacquiao was with Top Rank, Top Rank was entertaining the possibility of having Manny Pacquiao fight Terence Crawford. This goes back a few years, guys, because you got to remember, this is back when Top Rank still had Manny and Crawford. So this goes back several years. But Freddie Roach and Manny's team said, dude, we don't need that man in our lives. We ain't going near him. It was Manny Pacquiao, not Bob Arum, that prevented that fight from happening. Bob Arum was interested in it. and talked about it. Go back, you can pull up the interviews where he talked about it. It was Manny and his team that said, we don't need to go near this dude. What's interesting is several years after that, Manny's team was willing to fight Errol Spence. Make of that what you will. Okay. I think we're caught up. Now, Robert Blake says, please no NFL sports comparisons, just boxing. All right. Look, man, I was proud of my comparison. Come on, it's applicable, man. Because in boxing, we don't get the Super Bowl often enough. All right. And by the way, guys, when I say Super Bowl, that doesn't necessarily mean undisputed, because that shit's all political. There's plenty of times where we know who the two best fighters in a division are. They might have 1 or 2 belts between them, maybe even no belts. It doesn't matter. I don't give a shit about undisputed. I really don't. It's an accomplishment, okay? But I don't rate it as highly as number 1 versus number 2. Canelo Alvarez cleaned out 168 a couple years ago. Undisputed. He never fought the number 1 challenger. That was Benavidez. I would rate him beating Benavidez once over all the other guys he beat combined, because he's the number 1 guy. So it'd be number 1 versus number 2. That's what I'm looking at. Anyway, let's talk about Jake Paul, everyone's favorite. This past Saturday, August 5th in Dallas, I think this was regular DAZN. Wow, DAZN gave you guys a fight without going straight to pay-per-view. And they actually had a fight card without like porn stars fighting each other and taking off their top. And so it was, all right, DAZN, they're back, baby. Jake Paul wins a unanimous decision over Nate Diaz, bounces back from his first loss earlier this year. Okay. The Jake Paul thing, the Jake Paul experiment, as I call it, continues to march on. It's not going to end anytime soon. They're going to be back in the ring. If not by the end of the year, then definitely the beginning of next year. And they're going to continue doing the same formula, beating up on these guys who don't know how to box and they're like 500 years old, because it's worked for them so far. So Jake Paul is a mixture of good and bad and ugly. There are some things, believe it or not, he actually does very, very well from a business standpoint, better than about 99% of boxers today, definitely American boxers. And a lot of his success is self-made. So the guy deserves credit. I'll also give him this. He trains hard. He trains his butt off. He dedicates himself to it. He's been training consistently now, living as a professional prize fighter for several years. He's been living that life. So he does deserve some credit. Paul went pro in 2020. Okay, so he's been a pro for almost 4 full years now. He's had 8 opponents, and there was a layoff, I think, of course, during 2020. And there was, I think, the Huey Fury fight got delayed a couple times. That wasn't his fault. That was Fury's fault. But interesting enough, 5 of his 8 opponents were making their professional boxing debut. So that lets you know the level of his opposition. But they've been able to get names from other sports and get them in a boxing ring and use those names to market to gullible, casual fans who thought these guys had a chance in hell. And they've done very well with that. They've been very successful. So Paul makes a lot of people angry in the boxing business, and people that are normally very, very intelligent just get really stupid when it comes to this guy for some reason. It's interesting to watch, including friends of mine, like people that I really respect and think are pretty smart and have intelligent takes most of the time. This Jake Paul stuff, they just seem to be missing it. I see a lot of people going, and I hate to go here, guys, but it's not me saying this. A lot of people saying, Jake Paul, everything he has is white privilege. He's only getting these fights because of white privilege. Pardon my language, but that's about the stupidest fucking take I've heard. Do you know what privilege Jake Paul has? Jake Paul has I have tens of millions of social media followers and billions of social media views privilege. That's the privilege he has. It has not a fucking thing to do with where his ancestors come from. That's the weakest, lowest hanging fruit you can pluck from the tree. do better, think a little more critically. And I'm including friends of mine in on that comment because I've seen friends of mine say that, and like I want to respond, and I'm just like, just leave that alone. Just leave that alone. Okay. Just to put this into perspective, guys, I checked this today. Jake Paul has 20 million followers on YouTube. 20 million. By comparison, Top Rank Boxing has 2.3 million. Showtime Boxing has 1.7 million. So Jake Paul has more than 5 times the combined social media following of Top Rank and Showtime combined, and that's just on YouTube. I continue. He has Jake Paul has 17. No, I'm skipping ahead. He has 24 million followers on Instagram. Top Rank has 1.7 million, and Showtime has 2 million. So once again, his following dwarfs these platforms, the entire platform. His TikTok following, 17 million. 17 million. He has 4.5 million Twitter followers. Top Rank has 650,000. Showtime has 350,000. Okay. And I can keep going across more platforms. And I can compare him to other fighters and other athletes, other celebrities. Guys, this dude is a superstar. I'm not saying I get it. I don't understand it. He became famous for stupid pranks that I would never watch, but that's how he became famous, okay? Kim Kardashian's famous for doing nothing but banging a B-rate pop star. That's it. Like, some people are famous for, I don't know why, but Jake Paul's famous. Now, for people 30 and over, it's hard to think of somebody being famous if they're not on TV, because we grew up with TV. So when you think famous, you think of people on TV or on radio, something like that. But Jake Paul isn't. Jake Paul is famous from social media. He's famous from YouTube, TikTok, what have you. He's a celebrity in the modern social media era. And that is what he brings to the table. He has more economic muscle through that following than 98% of professional prize fighters today. That's not it's probably 99%. That shouldn't be a controversial statement, okay? That is why Jake Paul is getting fights on premium cable, these sports platforms across the spectrum. He's fought on every damn platform. It's why he's headlining pay-per-views. It's because of that following he brings. Throughout the history of boxing, throughout the history of sports, but particularly boxing, there have always been celebrities that have dabbled in the sports world for fun. In boxing, celebrity boxing goes back to the beginning. We have former presidents who were boxers in college and stuff like that, right? Celebrity boxing has always been a thing. And in the modern era, that is going to mean a guy on social media who has a big social media following. Jake Paul is not the only one doing it. He's the one doing it who has the biggest following. Guys, if The Weeknd decided he was going to do professional boxing, does anybody doubt? Literally, if The Weeknd tomorrow said, I've been training for 6 months, I'm going to fight. He named some pop star. I'm going to fight this dude on pay-per-view. That does 1 million buys. Easy. The Weeknd goes pro, 1 million buys. He would get all the same hoopla and energy that Jake Paul is getting because of his following. The WBC would be interested in ranking him. Showtime and DAZN would be scratching at each other trying to, get that fight. Does anyone deny this? That's basically what this kid's doing. And so I'm not mad at Jake Paul. Jake Paul is he's not the problem. He's not the virus. He's a symptom of the problem or the virus. And he's just a smart guy who works hard, who's taking advantage of it all because he sees a massive flaw and opportunity for him in this industry. Why does that make you all so fucking mad? Is Jake Paul ranked by any ratings organization? At present, he's not. Has he fought for any world titles? Is he on anyone's pound for pound list? Has he won fight of the year honors or round of the year or knockout of the year? Remember, he had some pretty big knockouts in some of those fights. That Tyrone Woodley knockout, who's that basketball player he destroyed? Those knockouts were among the top knockouts of the year. Did he win any awards? Then why are you all so mad? If he was getting accolades and all this, okay, I understand it. But right now, all he's doing is he's taking advantage of his following and milking it and making money off it. How is it any fucking different than Tank Davis and his team using Ryan Garcia and his social media following to profit when they did that fight earlier this year? That's exactly what they did. How is it different? I'm not comparing Gervonta Davis and Jake Paul's boxing skills or accomplishments. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the business model. Same fucking model. Y'all are really mad at this dude. You should don't hate the player, hate the game. Be mad at the game. Don't be mad at him. Now, here's where I will take issue. If Mauricio Sulaiman tried, if Paul had beat Hughie Fury, Sulaiman was going to rate him in the WBC cruiserweight ratings. When that stuff starts happening, then I'm going to speak up. Okay. Although at this point, I'm unplugged from giving a shit about any of this stuff. So I'm just saying, guys, that's the privilege Jake Paul brings in. It's really not a privilege. It's something he earned. I don't get it. I'm not a Jake Paul subscriber. Never watched this shit on YouTube. I don't understand it. Don't understand the appeal. I'm not a moron. So that's just whatever. If you're into that, cool. I shouldn't say you're a moron if you're into that. I just don't get it. But he earned that following. He built himself up, and he's worked in the gym and gotten himself in shape and learned how to box a little bit. And he's made a business out of it. I ain't mad at the guy. I think he's learned a thing or two from looking at what Floyd Mayweather has done, from looking at like what Gervonta Davis has done, even from like what Mike Tyson has done. Mike Tyson and Roy Jones and stuff. Just kind of looking at some of those promotions, they've learned a thing or two, and they've done pretty well with it. So anyway, that's where I'm at with that. Look, obviously, if Jake Paul steps up and fights an actual boxer again, he's going to lose again. Maybe at some point he can improve. If he actually did, and he like rematch Fury and beat him, well, good for him, man. Good for him. He's still not getting on my pound for pound list. Okay. Chris Singh with the super chat. Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate it, man. You are awesome. He says, I think my fellow Philly native Boots versus Thurman would be a great matchup. Keith doesn't deserve to get Bud or Spence now, and it would be the perfect step up for Boots. Maybe for vacated belts, since I hear Crawford is already planning to go to 154. I hope all is well. Hey, man, I would love to see Jaron Boots Ennis in there against Keith Thurman, Errol Spence, Bud Crawford. I don't think he's going to get any of those fights, brother. I don't think those guys want to fight him. The only way Thurman would fight him is if he was given an unbelievable amount of money. He'd have to be grossly overpaid to even consider doing that fight. That's not going to happen because the economic power to just piggyback off of everything I just talked about with Jake Paul. Boots is the antithesis of that. He has absolutely zero economic muscle that he brings to the table, no following. So there's just way too much risk and not enough reward for Thurman to do it, or Spence or Crawford. They have options. I mean, Thurman could be Errol Spence's get back fight. They were talking about making that fight, and they were actually talking about making it at 154 before. Remember that? So he could be Spence's get back fight. He could maybe even fight Bud at 154. All three of those guys have options. They ain't going near Jaron Ennis. He's just too dangerous for them. Boots is going to have to fight the guys available for him in the division. Take a page out of Terence Crawford's playbook. Just get in there and dominate the guys that you fight and get better and focus on your craft and know that big fight will eventually happen. But it's going to be a tough road for him ahead. It really is. Sam with another super chat. Thank you so much. He says Diaz couldn't hurt Tim Anderson with those slaps. Oh shit. Yeah. Guys, so Nate Diaz, look, I'm not even going to sit here and diss the guy. He's an MMA fighter. Those guys, this is no disrespect to MMA. There are some MMA fighters in the gym I train at. Those guys are strong. They're cardio freaks. They're strong, tough fighters, man. They can't punch. They just can't. It's not something that they do very well. Oh, their stand-up is great in the AFC. This such and such fighter has got great stand-up. He's among the best in the UFC. Okay, that's like being the world's tallest midget when they come over into boxing. It doesn't matter. So, yeah, Diaz, was slapping at Jake Paul. Couldn't put a dent in him. Not at all surprising. By the way, I didn't watch 1 second of that fight. I actually haven't watched 1 second of Jake Paul's entire career. I've seen some highlights and stuff of the knockouts, but that's it. Tim Anderson got slapped. I can't remember this is a baseball player. To circle back to my Major League Baseball reference, there was a scuffle between two teams this weekend. I can't remember the teams or the players involved, but this one dude threw a very weak roundhouse slap of a right hand. It landed on this Tim Anderson dude, and he passed out. It was hilarious, and it just showed how the average man, even a world-class athlete in another sport, they cannot take punches. This wasn't even a proper punch, and that guy dropped. And by the way, Tim Anderson's a complete piece of shit. He's not a good person. So that was awesome that happened to him. He deserved it. He's not a good person. So I was happy to see that. Couldn't have happened to a bigger piece of shit. All right. Oh shit, Chris Bergen. Thank you, Chris. Chris Bergen just corrected me. He says it was Tommy Fury. You keep saying Huey Fury. Holy shit, dude. That tells you how I didn't even watch the fight, man. You're right, though. It was Tommy Fury. Why did I think it was Huey Fury? I don't know why I thought that. But yeah, you're right. You're totally right. It was Tommy Fury. Because yeah, Huey Fury is better than Tommy. He's not great, but he's definitely better than Tommy. So yeah, I don't think my bad, Chris. My bad, everybody, because I've probably said it 8 times during that segment. Okay, let's real quick, guys, preview this Saturday, August 12th. Top Rank has a show, Glendale, Arizona, ESPN. In the main event, Emmanuel Navarrete going up against Oscar Valdez for Navarrete's WBO junior lightweight title. That should be an interesting, fun scrap. That should be a good one. That's probably the best fight. Actually, yeah, it's definitely the best fight of the entire weekend. The rest of the matchups are pretty flimsy. Also on this card, Raymond Murataya of Southern California, 18-0, a lightweight prospect. He's featured on that card. And undefeated California native heavyweight prospect Richard Torres, 5-0, also on that undercard. Matchroom from London on the zone. Filip Hrgović going up against Dempsey McKean, who has a very, very poor resume. Hrgović coming off a 1-year layoff. He had that really, really rough fight with Zhang a year ago, last August. Returning from that layoff to fight McKean. I like Hrgović big in that fight. That's a complete showcase for him. And then Derek Chisora versus Gerald Washington. That could be fun because it's 2 big heavyweights. That could be the second best matchup or second best fight on paper of the weekend. But man, Gerald Washington has been stopped in 5 of his last 7 fights going back to 2017. If Chisora is on point for this one and in shape, it could get ugly. We shall see. PBC is a show in Maryland on Showtime. Emmanuel Rodriguez going up against Melvin Lopez, who has a very poor resume for the vacant IBF bantamweight belt. Lopez has stepped up once in his career. In 2019, he fought Jose Velasquez and was knocked out. So this is a showcase fight for Rodriguez. What Lopez is doing in a title fight, I couldn't tell you. But it is what it is. Okay. Let's see if we can take a couple calls real quick. We got to make these quick, guys, and we'll go through as many as I can, and then we're going to wrap it up, all right? So let's start with the UK. 796, you're on the show. What's up? UK caller, can you hear me? Uh-oh. Okay. Let me try this again. Let me refresh.
Hello.
Oh, yeah. Hamed, is that you?
Yeah, how's it going?
What's up, man?
I thought about that. Yeah, I was gonna say, I didn't catch everything you were saying, but do you think if a rematch between Crawford and Spence was to happen at 154, do you think it would be different? Because I've already seen guys like Mayweather and these PBC fans saying that Spence was weight trained, but I don't think he was weight trained because before the fight, that was not the case. And if he won, I don't think all this would have been brought up.
Yeah, Hamed, I didn't specifically talk about that in my rant earlier, but it's indicative of the kind of excuses that have been coming from that side. And look, Errol Spence has been a welterweight his entire career. He's never had an issue making weight. Now suddenly he loses. Oh, he was weight drained. Well, was he weight drained in his other 30 some odd fights? He's held these welterweight belts, and the organizations have had no problem sanctioning him for their championships. Um, I think that's just an excuse. If they do a rematch at 154, I do agree that it plays out differently. You know how it plays out differently? Bud will get him out of there in less than half the fight. He'll get him out of there in 5 or 6 rounds that time. It doesn't matter what weight it's at. Crawford is just better, and he's figured out Spence now. It took him a round and a half to figure Spence out. Now that he's figured him out, it's going to be one-way traffic. There's zero need for a rematch. Absolutely zero need.
Yeah, I didn't manage to call in. I think it was last week, but I did score that fight round by round when I was watching it live, and I rewatched it. I still thought Spence only won the third round. I know a lot of people thought he won the first round, but I thought the first round Crawford still was doing the better work. But those are the only 2 rounds he was competitive in. I thought Kell Brook was having more success early on against Crawford than Spence. I just think Crawford's got his number, but I wouldn't mind seeing a rematch because the meltdown and everything I'm seeing online, I don't know how these guys will react if Crawford fights them again and beats him up even worse, because a lot of these guys are the same people that are seeing Crawford as a fought anyone, hasn't beaten anyone. They were denigrating and discrediting his accomplishments and his resume. But I always thought Crawford's win over Victor Postol was better than majority of Spence's wins. And I think that win and the fact that he cleaned that weight class out was being overlooked because Spence has been a welterweight his entire career. And although I give him credit for some of these wins, even the Brook and the Porter win, it took him like 10 years to finally get the undisputed fight. And even when he was fighting guys like Mikey Garcia and Sean Porter and Danny Garcia, he couldn't stop or even drop some of these guys. So I thought he was always overrated. I had no problem with him being ranked pound for pound, like top 10, or even after the Ugas fight, maybe top 6 or 7, something like that. But after the Brook fight, I thought way too many people start putting him up too high, like after just one fight, which was against a guy coming off a bad loss as well.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I agree with you. Look, I honestly don't need to see a rematch. I think it'd be much more interesting to see Bud move up and fight somebody like Jermell Charlo after he loses to Canelo. He'll go the distance with Canelo. He won't get knocked down or anything. He'll just lose a decision. So Jermell Charlo versus Terence Crawford next year to me is a way more interesting fight. I'd much rather see that.
But that will have to wait though, because Charlo's fighting Canelo at 168. I personally don't really think that's a great fight because I would have rather seen Canelo fight Benavidez than Charlo fight Tim Tszyu. But Crawford's gonna have to fight someone next that's not gonna be Charlo. So he's either gonna have to be someone like Spence, maybe Tim Tszyu. I wouldn't mind the Jaron Ennis fight because the thing I didn't like about Crawford saying that he's gonna move up is at 140 and at 147, although he'll become the undisputed champion, he hasn't really defended the title. I know for some people that doesn't mean anything, but I do like it when guys stick around, like what Usyk did at cruiserweight. He pretty much cleaned out the division. Then he fought Bellew and knocked that guy out decisively. So there was no question, or any question marks of anyone else who was even a challenge or someone who was worthy of really fighting him at that time. So I wouldn't mind Crawford fighting Ennis, but I don't think that fight's going to happen because of the business aspect. And I think Crawford's just after big fights at the moment.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't blame him at this point. If they can make a big fight next year for him at 154, that'd be great. PBC has a lot of fighters there. For the record, from what I hear, Bud is a free agent. People keep calling him a PBC fighter. There's no set contract right now between the two of them. I know they're negotiating, but as far as I know, he's a free agent and he can kind of do what he wants to do. So
he's got one more fight left, didn't he? Or with PBC,
I think PBC has options on him and stuff like that, but I don't think he has to do exactly what they tell him to do. I think he can kind of do what he wants, but he's definitely going to want big money fights. He's going to want a couple of name fights, and then he's going to hang it up. He's going to want to fight for a title at 154, so he can have a title in a 4th weight class, and then get a couple of big money defenses or something like that, and then call it a career. And I think he's earned that. But I got to run. Yeah. I got some other calls to jump to.
All right. I was going to say one last thing before I go.
Go ahead,
I do think, though, I don't think he'll probably fight once more with PBC if it's against Spence, because Spence has the right to activate that rematch. But before I go, I was just going to make a comment. I don't know what you think about it. With this whole PBC pay-per-view, numbers, whose number is more reliable, Glazer or Dan? Because I've seen people going back and forth, but I'm not sure who's more credible. Because Dan, I think, he was a good writer at the moment. Some of his reporting and that, to me, seems like he's trying to stay on side with PBC or trying to get a job.
He's an establishment guy.
Anti-PBC.
Yeah, Rick is very anti-PBC. What is Rick's number and what is Dan's number? Dan's number is 650, right? But what is Rick's?
550 or 500.
Okay,
like that.
So
I don't know who to believe.
I'd split the difference and call it 600, which is what I did on this show. It's right around 600,000 buys. I'd split the difference. But again, they're bickering over 100,000. Hamed, who honestly, who gives a shit? It's not like one guy's saying 200,000, the other guy's saying 900,000. They're bickering over 100,000. Either way, a fight of this magnitude should have done $1.5 million, 2 million. And it's not. And there's a reason for that. So anyway, but I got to jump to the next call, man.
Yeah. All
right. Thanks, Hamed.
All right. No.
But yeah, guys, to me, that's the greater story here is the 600,000 number. And again, whether it's slightly over that, slightly under it, whatever, 600,000 pay-per-view buys. When you're being outperformed, when the welterweight Super Bowl that's been 5 years in the making is being outperformed by a very unproven fighter beating up on a social media fighter, which is what Davis Garcia was. When you're being outperformed by that, it should tell everyone something. Like marketing matters, social media following definitely matters. Personality, all of it, promoting, it all matters. And it was really easy for PBC and their legion of unpaid interns on Twitter and YouTube to say, oh, Top Rank hasn't promoted Terence Crawford. They haven't promoted him. They haven't made a name. They haven't done this. Well, PBC's had 1.5 years to work with Bud. And they promoted the fight with him and Spence. By the way, Spence, his fights do around 300,000 pay-per-view buys. He's certainly not a superstar, okay? These two did a fight. It did around 600,000 pay-per-view buys. So it's easy for them now to sit back and say, oh, remember all those comments for years, guys? Bob Arum isn't promoting them. They've failed. Bud, he's not a star. Bud just doesn't have that personality. He's just not a breakthrough personality. He doesn't care about that shit. He cares about his legacy, going in the ring and doing his job. That's what he cares about. He doesn't care about the other stuff. So he doesn't go the extra mile on social media and with all the media stuff. He just doesn't. He never will. He's not that guy. Okay, real quick. Let's take a couple more quick calls. Let's go to 559. What's up? You're on the show.
Hey, what's up, Mike? It's me, Miguel, man. What's up? How you doing?
What's up, Miguel? I'm doing well, brother.
Just right here with the baby and the girlfriend, and we're just here. We say what's up. Hi to everyone. It's been a very, very revealing past. How long has it been since the fight? About a week?
About a week.
2 weeks almost?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's when I say it's brought out the loonies from the woodwork, it's brought out the crazies, man. Like these guys, there's this dude called Dr. 805 on BDA Boxing, the crazy ass boxing channel, talking about there were signs of neurological damage before and after the fight. And you know something is real. Yeah, everyone's an expert, and the only one not giving excuses is Errol Spence Jr.
There you go.
You know what I mean?
Know what?
So, like,
That's a great point, Miguel. And you know what? We need to double down on that because that's an outstanding point. You know, when all those guys were freaking out about Wilder Fury and they made all those excuses, Wilder bought into that shit and like played into it, right? And he talked about it. Spence, to his credit, hasn't gone that route.
Yeah.
He hasn't played into any of that bullshit, and he's just giving Crawford his credit. So massive credit and massive props to Errol Spence for not even going along with that bullshit from these idiots out there.
I really think, and before I finish up this call, I'm gonna be fairly quick because I know we got other callers, but I'm gonna make a few points, and I'm gonna use certain words that people are not gonna like, but at the end of the day, it's the truth, and the truth prevails, man. And as we've seen, for last show, not the last show you did, but the one before that, I made a point saying, hey, BBC Al Heyman, you know, have duped everyone, including these fighters, into going along with this straight up plantation Uncle Tom system. I'm gonna straight up say it, dude. You know, on top of all the horrible decisions that we've seen, like robberies wise, like on Showtime and PBC, the crappy ass stoppage with Rolly Romero when the old man was beating him, all this stuff, that's just a taste. What you really got to look at is how they work and operate. Errol Spence didn't make excuses because he, at that point during the promotion, I think, like leading up to the fight, he was basically realizing, holy shit, they've been holding me back. And now they're pitting me up against this dude. It's like, uh-oh. And a little bit of the truth came out. It's like saying, okay, Al Heyman, that's the plantation owner. The PBC fighters, those are the slaves. I'm going to straight up say it. I don't give a damn what anyone says, dude. That's the way I see it. In the days of slavery, there was two types of slaves. There was the field Negro and the house Negro. And this is a quote from Malcolm X. You can hear it on his speech. The house Negro and the field Negro. These guys that they pop up, they're an example for all these other guys to follow, thinking that's a good example, and it's not. You don't hold someone's greatness back. You don't blatantly violate the Muhammad Ali Act. That's another thing nobody even wants to talk about because it's so prevalent these days. Dude, these promoters got these sanctioning organizations in their pockets, and that's literally what Muhammad Ali fought and died for it. Not to, he had a fucking Congress bill passed that said you cannot monopolize this shit. We are contract workers at the end of the day, dude. We are our own brand, you know what I mean? But look what happens with all these crazy ass people thinking, okay, well, we can do this and that, try to follow the Mayweather blueprint, this and that. It's all bullshit, dude. It's all about control. And Bud Crawford broke all that. Now, it might sound a little harsh, but it's true, dude. Like, you know, we gotta wake up and smell the coffee, man. Like, don't let people control you in any aspect of your life. Like, I understand we all got, you know, jobs and we all got bosses and this and that. But come on, dude. The welterweight division, and now that I'm talking about it, it was held back longer than 5 years. It's been held back since Errol Spence came into the picture. You know what I mean? And systematically, since PBC has started, they have put their foothold to hold back and own the division illegally and with such corruption in every weight class from the bottom up. Fulton and then Tank Davis doing all this stupid shit from like 126 to all the way to 140, dude. All those fights got held back. But we barely got Ryan Garcia versus Tank Davis, two prospects that were propped up as pay-per-view stars. Shit like that. And who is responsible for this? Al Heyman. Dude, I'm not gonna say his name, right? But there's some guy that's promoting my fights right now. He's promoting a lot of us right now down in Tijuana. I'm not gonna say his name. He is best friends with the Mayweathers. He kicks you with the dad. He's the one that got me a picture with Floyd Senior. Okay, he went with Crawford. At the end of the day, a lot of these PBC dudes that are making their picks are like, hey, you know what? The dupe is over. We got to keep it real now. Crawford's going to destroy these guys. And hey, there was only a few of those guys that did that, but I give them props because, like you said, not even the commentators. For years, this is like some weird-ass, like Orwellian shit, 1984. Dude, they wouldn't even, if you mention Bud Crawford's name working for Showtime and PBC, you will get fired. Yeah. Or if you think I'm playing, look what happened to Paulie Malignaggi.
Yeah, you're getting into some sensitive stuff, though, with that, man. Miguel, I got to jump to some other calls, man.
All right, man. Fight the power. God bless you, Mike.
All right. Thanks, Miguel.
Thank you, boss. Thank you.
And look, guys, my thing is here on this show, I want to give everybody a chance to say what they feel, as long as you keep it respectful, even if it's controversial. And I always want to give you guys an opportunity to say, what you feel. So Miguel made, his feelings known on this whole thing. Look, I don't like those kinds of, me personally, I don't like those kinds of comparisons because it kind of undermines the horrors of that era in this country, and then where it still continues around the world. So I personally do not like those comparisons. However, I could see why people are frustrated with that business model. And look, Miguel made a point about the welterweight division being held back. Man, when you look back, Spence has been around for over a decade. It's taken him over a decade to get this undisputed fight, right? Crawford was able to clean up 140 in a couple of years. In a way, we saw what he did at bantamweight, clean that out in a couple of years. Usyk at cruiserweight, clean that out in a couple of years. So these divisions can be cleaned out rather quickly. And I don't even just mean with undisputed. I just mean with fighting the top names. You can do it quicker. You don't need over a decade. So there's just a track record over there of delaying things and pushing things, kicking the can down the road. And the people that pay for it is the fans, because you guys are not getting the fight you want. But also, to Miguel's general overall point, the PBC fighters, they're getting paid, they're making a lot of money, but there is an undeniable track record when they finally step up and fight somebody that's a non-PBC guy. I think their winning percentage is like 15%, 10 to 15%. Okay, going back the last 10 or so, 20 years, there is an undeniable track record. I'm going to say like last 10 years or so. It might not even be that long, honestly. It might be less than that. That to me shows that the fighters are not being taken care of in terms of their development. They're getting paid though. So as a fighter, you go with the promoter and the management that has the track record of where you want to take your career. Do you want to make the most money possible and kind of be protected? Do you want to make the best fights and get your market value, but know that you're going to be taken care of from a development standpoint? That would be maybe going with Top Rank. Top Rank's going to develop you and get the most of your potential, but you're going to make what your fair market value is. You're not going to get overpaid over there. Or do you want to go a different direction? And some of these fighters make their decision, and it is what it is. You can only blame the promoter so much. At some point, you got to look at the fighters themselves. Gideon with the super chat, thank you so much. He said, did I miss the Paul versus Diaz fight breakdown? Yeah, but it was not very much a breakdown. Paul beat Diaz in a boxing match. Holy shit. Wow. And guess what? Tomorrow morning, I'm going to take a shit. Like that's, how surprising that was. But Gideon, if you missed my breakdown of the Jake Paul experience, the Jake Paul experiment, sorry, go back and watch that. Go back and listen to that, because I think you might enjoy it. I think a lot of people, look, again, I haven't watched 1 second of a Jake Paul fight. Actually, you know what? I keep forgetting. I covered one for Ring TV. I did cover one. It was here in Atlanta. I attended that. I was ringside. So I was at one Jake Paul fight. Other than that, I haven't watched a single second of Jake Paul's boxing career. But I understand why he's making money and getting opportunities. And it has everything to do with the economic muscle he brings to the table through his social media following. It's not that different from what Ryan Garcia got earlier this year against Tank Davis. Sam with the super chat, thank you so much. He says, Oscar versus Navarrete. I'm going. Who you got? Damn, dude, have fun, man. Have fun. Let me know how that, how you like Glendale and that Phoenix area, what you think of it. It's probably gonna be hot as hell, but it's pretty much hot everywhere. So who do I like in that? I don't know, dude. I guess on the surface, Valdez is the better boxer, and like he should be able to outbox Navarrete. That's what I think. That's like my gut feel. But I don't know, dude. I don't know. Sam with another super chat says, slaves don't drive Ferraris. Come on, man. Well, yeah. Okay. Let's go. One more. Let's get one more call, guys. Let's get Nacho on the line to wrap it up. Nacho, what's up, brother? How you doing?
I'm all right, Mike. How about yourself?
Doing good, man. Doing good.
All right. So yeah, I'm not gonna go into a long tangent like Miguel did. I got kind of lost there for a second. I kind of understood the point he was trying to make, but it went a little longer than I think he should have. Just really quick about the fight coming up this weekend, Mike. I think it's an interesting fight, but I gotta favor Navarrete so long as he makes 130 without any issues. Because lately his problem has been actually making weight for the fights, and then his ability to perform the next day has definitely been an issue, as far as like he's had to struggle with certain guys that he fought lately because of his weight issues. If he can make 130 with no problem, I would have to favor him just because of the length, the punch output, and the crazy angles that he throws shots from that I don't think Valdez is going to be prepared for, because Valdez is the classic orthodox boxer, but he's never really faced a guy like Navarrete who just kind of wings shots from different angles and you get hit with stuff that you really don't prepare for and you don't see coming. So if Navarrete can be at 130 without any problems, I think he should win the fight. But if he doesn't, then I think the advantage goes to Valdez, because at that point I think he's going to be able to, gas him out, and then eventually you'll probably beat him, probably late TKO or maybe a decision. Since I don't really want to talk about what happened this weekend, Mike, because I have no interest in that Jake Paul, Nate Diaz card, it was like whatever.
Right.
I just wanted to pose a couple of questions regarding some fights that are coming up. What's your take on Haney taking on Prograis?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one, man. You know what? I actually like Haney in that fight. Am I crazy for liking Haney in that fight?
I'm more in the Prograis camp, and the only reason I'll tell you this is why, Mike. I think that Prograis is the naturally bigger guy.
Yeah. And
also, I think Prograis in his last fight, I think a lot of people are taking too much out of the fact that he struggled with a B-level guy in Zorrilla. I just don't think he was motivated for that fight. I think for this fight, he's going to be extremely motivated, especially considering that Haney's dad has been out here talking a whole bunch of shit about him and how they think he's going to be easy work. I think Prograis is going to be really motivated to take on Haney. I mean, I'm sure Haney will look a lot better at 140 than he did at 135. I'm just not sure he's going to be able to hold off Prograis in that fight.
Interesting. Yeah, look, if Prograis can pull that off, I'd love to see it. If he can return to the form he had, like in the Josh Taylor fight and stuff, where he was just he just felt more balanced and a little more sturdy on his legs and stuff, then yeah, it's just it's hard to know what to expect from him, because it's not just the last fight. I mean, the last fight he didn't look very good at all, but like his recent fights, dude, like his career is kind of plateaued in terms of the momentum and stuff, And Haney, look, a lot of people thought he lost to Lomachenko, but even if he did, losing to Lomachenko, there's no like shame in that. Lomachenko is a Hall of Fame level fighter. So I don't know. I got a feeling that Haney and his dad only take fights where they feel they have a significant advantage, whether it be size, skill, something. And they see something in Prograis where they think they can outbox him. But dude, I'd love to see Prograis pull it off. That'd be great.
Yeah. And then the other fight that was mentioned in a few weeks from now. So Brielle Matias was supposed to defend against Sergey Lipinets, but apparently the IBF stepped in and said no. So now they're saying that there's a chance that there's a purse bid going on between him and a guy named Shohan Ergayev. I don't know if you've heard of him, Mike. He's from like Uzbekistan.
Yeah, he's
fought a few times here in the U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah, him. If that fight gets made, what do you think of that fight?
So it would be Matias versus Ergachev.
Yeah.
It would be I don't think Ergashev's fought anybody on that level yet. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then he doesn't have a lot of power, right? Am I thinking of the right guy?
No, Ergayev can punch.
He can punch.
I think his record is
else.
like 18. He's like 18 or 19-0, but he has like 14 or 15 knockouts.
Okay.
So he's got power.
Because there's a couple of these guys from that part of the world based in Detroit right now, and they're promoted by Dimitri Salida, I think, because he does some shows up there in Detroit. And dude, I like that fight. That's a very interesting matchup. Very interesting. Great contrast to styles. That'd be a lot of fun, man.
Yeah. Oh, and then just real quick before I get off, Mike, I haven't heard anything about the replacement opponent for Joshua since Dillian Whyte got busted. Has anything been announced that you know of as far as who's going to replace him?
Nah, I've heard some names thrown out there, but I don't know. I just hope it's not like one of these dudes who's already fought or one of these guys that's just been passed around. Like I hope it's somebody new that could give him rounds and something to think about, kind of like Jermaine Franklin, like somebody on that level. But I don't know who it's going to be, man.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. All right, Mike. Well, that was all I had. All right, I'll talk to you later.
All right, thanks, Nacho. All right, guys. I know we got a few guys still on the line, everyone. But like I said, man, I got to bounce, guys. I'm just busy right now. It's hard for me to do a super long show. I promise it won't always be this way. Thanks for bearing with me, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. And we'll do it again next week. All right, peace.